And so, again, today's topic is certainly an important one, and I think in Howard County, education has always been important for those of us that live here as well as work here. And I think as we deal with this pandemic, education is certainly one of our top 5 issues that we see really being impacted by COVID-19. And so just as a refresher, we've touched on the past couple of weeks issues related to employer liability. We've talked about also behavioral and mental health. We've talked about facilities management. And today is again about education. And then we're going to wrap up our series on Thursday talking about childcare. Because certainly as businesses prepare to open, the issue of childcare will be huge and one that we will have to, I think, have a little bit of understanding on as we move forward. And so again, we have a great panel assembly. And I'm going to just start by introducing first Peggy Brookins. And Peggy is the former National Board of Professional Teaching Standards board member, but she joined the organization as the executive vice president in December of 2014 and was named the president and CEO in November of 2015. She has a long career as an educator, which includes many national leadership positions and accolades. In July of 2014, President Barack Obama named her as a member of the President's Advisory Commission on Educational Excellence for African Americans. She joins the national board from the Engineering and Manufacturing Institute of Technology at Forest High School in Ocala, Florida, which she co-founded in 1994, and where she served as director and as a mathematics instructor. She achieved her certification in adult and young adolescents mathematics in 2003, which was also renewed in 2013. She's been inducted into the University of Florida Hall of Fame in 2009, is a Florida Education Association, quote, Everyday Hero, and received the association's Excellence in Teaching Award as well. In 2013, she was named an Aspen Ideas Festival Scholar, and she received a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Florida. So certainly she is a Floridian at heart. And so with that, thank you, Peggy, for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Next, I'm going to introduce Dr. Kathleen, or Kate Hetherington, as we call her in Howard County. And she's the president of Howard Community College and truly has dedicated her career in higher education to advancing the mission of community colleges. She's the 4th president of Howard Community College and the first to also be a community college graduate. She has served as president of HCC since 2007, leading an institution nationally recognized for its strong academic programs and innovative approaches to instruction. Under her leadership, Howard Community College has grown to almost 30,000 credit and non-credit students, a 19.2% increase since 2007. And also supporting this enrollment growth has resulted in more than $268 million in college facilities construction and improvements, including building renovations, parking garages, a health sciences building, and a science, engineering, and technology building, as well as math and athletics complex currently in design. Prior to her presidency, she also served at the community college as its executive vice president, capital campaign manager, and vice president for student services. Before joining Howard Community College, she held various professional positions at Community College of Philadelphia, including Dean of Student Systems, and she was an adjunct professor at Delaware Community College in Pennsylvania. She holds a doctorate in education from Widener University, a Master of Science from Villanova University, and a BSS from Penn State University. And again, as we talked about, an associate's from the Community College of Philadelphia. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Kate Hetherington.
Thank you, Leonardo. Nice to be here.
Thank you. And lastly, but certainly not least, is Dr. Michael Martirano, and he was named superintendent for Howard County Public Schools system in July of 2018 after serving as interim superintendent from July 17th to June of 18, and as acting superintendent from May to June of 17. He considers himself a teacher first and foremost and believes children must be at the center of all decision-making, guided by the principle, quote, to teach a child, you must know a child well. He is committed to leading with equity and giving every child an opportunity to succeed. Dr. Martirano recently served as West Virginia State Superintendent of Schools, which during his tenure, he saw notable success in the areas of early childhood literacy, graduation rates, and career technical education. Prior to that, he served 9 years as Superintendent of St. Mary's County Public Schools in Leonardtown, Maryland, where during his tenure, the four-year graduation rate increased from the low 80s to an all-time high of 93.5%. Dr. Martirano has been an educator for more than 35 years and has a wide range of educational and administrative experience through his work as a science teacher, principal, and visiting professor at Johns Hopkins University. His return to Howard County, he says, feels like coming home because he previously served the school system as the director of school administration and has lived in the county for 19 years. He holds a doctorate of education in school management and instruction, leadership from Nova Southeastern University, and 2 Masters of Education degrees and a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Maryland. And again, it's my pleasure to bring to you Dr. Michael Martirano.
Thank you, Leonardo. Glad to be here today.
With that, you're welcome. We're going to jump right in. And so the first question that all of our panelists will answer, and we're going to start with Peggy, and then I guess we'll just go across my screen, hopefully as it comes across to you, with Peggy, followed by Dr. Martirano, and then Kate. And that is, the coronavirus has significantly impacted many of our institutions, of course, which education is one, as we've talked about. Now, in your opinion, what do you believe will be some of the near-term impacts of COVID-19 on both K through 12 and higher education? And certainly feel free to answer, as most appropriate for you to the area that you work in, starting with you, Peggy.
Thank you. Just thinking about what's happened from our perspective, COVID-19 has increased the public's appreciation for teachers, number one. The public is better able to see firsthand the complexity of a teacher's work. And they've also seen how they've responded to COVID-19 professionally and with the utmost of dedication in supporting students and communities through the crisis, because from pre-K all the way up to grade 12, you have parent involvement at the same time. And there are few silver linings around this crisis, but public support for teachers and their willingness to invest in schools, I think, has been one of those that the profession has needed up to this point. And it has also uncovered, inequities in the system as well that I think cannot be ignored up to this point. We've seen the same thing, I believe, in higher ed with the idea of how has it interrupted clinical practice, and that experience for pre-service teachers who are coming into what we would want to say prepared to do this work on day one. And we can talk about later some of the ideas that National Board has had around higher ed as well.
Dr. Martirano?
Thank you. And let me build on those introductory words. What I have found is we're well into the 21st century. It is now 2020 and we're 20 years into the 21st century. And what I have found with the pandemic is that all school systems are woefully underprepared and woefully undersupported in the arena of technology. Peggy just talked about the inequities. I have led my entire tenure talking about the inequities in education. And during the pandemic, the inequities have come front and centered with the digital divide, the number of for our students, the number of students who do not have devices. In Howard County, we did our survey initially as we were rolling out our online learning platform, and we have pushed out close to 16,500 computers to our students who need the devices. Also, our hotspots, the number of students who are not able to connect to the internet. And again, as Peggy was stating, the concerns about our teachers, the lack of preparation for our teachers in this arena, where many were making the assumption that they would just be able to hit a switch and go right into online learning. We spent an incredible amount of our time early on making certain that we had the infrastructure in place and that we provided professional development for our teachers who had to support our students. So in essence, we have a model of support from our Board of Education supporting my work, for me supporting our staff, our principals and our teachers, who in turn then support our students. And if there's a break in that link, we have a major problem. And so we've analyzed those gaps, and those inequities are a big concern. But we've used that as an opportunity to advance and address the inequities by providing more support to our teachers and providing more of a voice around providing the infrastructure of devices and internet connectivity that I think has really come front and center for all of us.
Leonardo, building on what the other panelists have said, Peggy, Mike, I would add that for HCC, we have also provided laptops, we provided hotspots. We provided them for students, but we also had to provide them for faculty and staff because everything went remote. On March 12th, we stopped having classes, but from that point forward until we went remote for our students, which was on March 30th, those 2.5 weeks, we had rapid implementation of shifting from face-to-face to rapid implementation of remote offerings. And that not only means what the incredible work that the faculty did to pivot from face-to-face to remote, but also what the staff had to do. I'd say, if anything, what we're seeing right now is the opportunities that are coming out because of this. You know, the silver linings that Peggy referenced. For example, we never did telecounseling before with students, never had to. We would schedule students face-to-face appointments. Now we're able to offer telecounseling through all of our counselors that are available and advisors. And that has provided students with an opportunity to be connected to the college and feel like there's support, because for many students we know, mental health issues are really rapidly rising when you're quarantined. So those are some of the things that we're seeing. We also are seeing that through federal funding, we received funding through the CARES Act. We were able to address the most needy students through close to $1 million we've dispersed already for students that we used a formula of students that were the most needy, those receiving Pell. So we were able to supply funds for them to help them with COVID-related expenses, whether that was buying food or making sure that they were able to make rent payments. Again, it had its complications because, you know, with federal money, there's a lot of rules and regulations that have to be implemented and kept changing. But we'll be continuing to provide funds to needy students through the summer and the fall semester. So those are some of the things that are coming up that, you know, we're seeing. And then the other thing that's happening, we were very concerned because our summer and fall enrollments were pretty much in the tank. We're finding that people are making last minute decisions about what they're going to do with their lives. So actually our summer enrollments right now are higher than they were this time last year.
That's pretty impressive for sure. And I think we'll certainly talk about opportunities a little bit later. And maybe I guess the next question that we'll move into, that again, I'm going to ask for all three of you to answer, and then we'll start shifting into some questions a little bit more individualized. So last week we had the CDC introduced its return to work guide, and it spent a lot of time talking about education facilities and childcare, and just listing a number of various social distancing policies and masks and face coverings, and even what to do with no-touch trash cans and receptacles and hand sanitizers and so forth. So with all of these recommendations and suggestions, I guess the first question is, in general, what are your thoughts? But more importantly, how do these recommendations perhaps impact what I think we could certainly say are already strained budgets? I know that here in the county, there's been widespread discussion as to, again, how do we fund needs for education? But with these unexpected requirements, if you will, how are schools trying to juggle all of these new truly capital expenditures as it relates to their facilities and things of that nature. And so maybe we'll work our way from Kate, from you at the college, and then go back to Dr. Martirano and then to Peggy.
Well, I like to begin by telling you that we certainly are taking a hit on our revenues because our Children's Learning Center is closed, our bookstore is closed, our food service is closed. All those opportunities that the college has for generating revenue, we weren't able to meet those goals that we originally had. So putting aside that, then you have the related expenses that you have for things related to COVID-19. And again, we did receive some CARES funding, but there are restrictions on what those funds can be used for. We will be able to use some of them to offset our expenses, but our expenses are going to far exceed what that allocation is. We know that already. And we do have a draft of our recovery and reopening plan, which I'll be reviewing with our board tomorrow night at our board meeting. And essentially what that plan is it takes into consideration CDC guidance as well as what's happening with the governor's orders and of course what the related orders are from our county. But at each level, from the stay at home to the phase 1, from the phase 2, there's different things that the college has to do. And, those are expensive. Those are things that were not in our budget at a time when we're looking to see what the county is going to fund for us. We know there's funds from the state, but whether or not they get cut, we don't know. And, we were mindful not to take tuition out. We only took it up $2 per credit hour for this fall. So we're very much concerned about these related expenses and the impact that the social distancing has on how large a class size can be when we do reopen. I mean, we'll even walking down the hall, something as simple as that. Do we have enough that, people are able to walk on either side of the hallway? Maybe not. So it's very disruptive, but our primary goal is to keep people safe and make sure that we are not spreading the virus. So already for the essential staff that's on campus right now, they have to complete a survey every single day before they come on campus. Now this, might be for facilities staff, IT staff who's there for essential services, but this survey is asking them, and we have to track this, do you have a temperature? Have you been in contact with someone with COVID-19? So that's small scale. When you get to this larger scale of putting up plexiglass and putting dividers in bathrooms between sinks and making sure that people are, the hand sanitizers around. I mean, you're talking about a lot of money.
Dr. Martirano? And let me build on that from pre-K through 12 perspective. On March 13th was the day of which we closed for schools. And on that day, I immediately put a freeze on all of our spending within our budget, and realizing that there would be items then that we would suspend, that we would not be taking care of during that time, things such as substitute teachers, overtime, spending on a variety of pieces of equipment, things that we could then suspend and use as one-time money. So we're using those dollars very judiciously. We were able to use several million of those dollars to purchase additional Chromebooks for our students. It is my goal to move our school system to a one-to-one conversion, making sure that every child in our school system has a Chromebook. So we were able to purchase an additional 20,000 early on to address the digital divide and the equity concerns, using monies that are realized savings from this. At the same time, as Kate had mentioned, we all are very interested in the dollars from the federal and the state level, the CARES Act, and then positioning those dollars and things that we're spending during the pandemic to hopefully receive reimbursement from the federal government. There's a great focus, and should be at the national and state level, about the digital divide. Access and equity need to drive in this agenda. So we've put a great portion of our focus on making certain that our students and teachers and community have the tools necessary for this to happen in the future. But then also, as we transition and pivot to opening in the fall, the state of Maryland has pushed out guidance regarding what that should look like, but all that is just guidance. And I'll be meeting today with all the superintendents in the state of Maryland to further formulate some of the non-negotiables that have to be consistent between the 24 school systems in the state of Maryland. And first and foremost in Howard County, we're leading with what Kate had talked about. We're leading with safety first and foremost, keeping our young people safe, not just our young people, but our staff as well. I have great concern about our students and our teachers and staff who may be concerned, who may not want to come back to the employment place. And so we can't make assumptions about our staff. We have to talk about students and staff in the same breath. So looking at it from the safety piece of it, then addressing the operational pieces such as the CDC guidelines. I use the example often, just for us for transportation, if you follow a 6 foot distance between each individual, our buses contain about 50 to 60 young people. We could only put about 10 students on the bus at a time. And we would have to load from back to front and exit from front to back. Just within that example of operations tells you the complexity of keeping students safe. So understanding one, safety, leading with safety, the operations, as we then look at the issue of instruction. And then as we're looking at the different models, I've distilled those down to 3 different areas that we have to plan for and be agile and nimble. One, would it be a truly returning to school if there would be a miraculous vaccine that everybody is now able to go back to normalcy? We don't think so, but that would be one option. 2 would be the complete option of virtual continuing in perpetuity, but somewhere in between a hybrid model where we prepare for a minimal amount of students coming each week or each day and then having a rotational system. So there are so many variety of hybrid models to plan, but keeping at the forefront the safety, having the PPEs, the masks, the hand sanitizer, additional cleaning supplies is going to put an incredible strain on budgets across the board in general. But I want to make certain as we open up that our students have the tools that they need for learning and our staff has the tools to be able to keep everybody safe as we move through this. So looking through those lenses of safety, operations, and instruction are driving the agenda of planning for Howard County Public Schools.
And I'll just build on what both of our panelists have said. We recently released a policy brief that highlighted the ways in which National Board Certified teachers are going beyond what they normally do. And this brief gives advice to policymakers who want to support teachers at this time. And one of them, when we think about what teachers are doing, because we have to think around the entire country, particularly around special needs and those populations that people don't often think about during this time, and the incredible strain which has been on families and on teachers and on those students themselves, and what teachers like Tamara Hudson, who's a special education teacher in Nevada, spoke about, repurposing funds that were used in one way that can now be used in another way, looking at those who become unemployed and the critical work that they could be doing during the pandemic. And you spoke about cleaning schools and thinking about that as just one example of what needs to happen. And we also as an organization had to think quickly and be extremely nimble when we talk about certification. The organization itself had to change because we have assessment sites that we had to deal with. We had to change those dates because those assessment sites were shut down. We had to accommodate and just take some of the anxiety out of the national board process for teachers who are going through that process. And we have accommodated all 18,000 of those teachers who are currently going through the process, making sure if they wanted to submit now, if they will submit at a later window. We changed assessment centers. Some of those are slowly opening up to accommodate teachers, but also to have deferment without a cost to them or a lapse in certification. Thinking about when we go back to school again, how does that happen? And then the assessment of their portfolios once they've been submitted, how we do that, because this is also tied to increases in income for a lot of teachers around the country. And we are trying to make sure there is no delay for them whatsoever unless they have chosen a delay. So we're looking at now, we're looking at what we can do this summer as far as assessing those portfolios. We have all of that in place. And then what fall will look like in this new COVID reality around those who are starting the process. And this fall, we're also rolling out the new maintenance of certification, and everything is going to be on time. So it's one less thing for our teachers to think about going through this process. And Leonardo, I will send you that brief, and hopefully, we can share it with everyone to let you know what teachers are really thinking and what their needs are.
Thank you. And I think that's really a good segue into this next question. And so when you and I talked, one of the things that I've shared is that if nurses are the front line in hospitals, I've said that teachers are front line in our schools. And so from what you're seeing, and again, talk a little bit about how COVID-19 is ultimately changing perhaps how teachers may be trained in the future, but also even how they deliver future instruction.
Well, this is a point that Michael brought up, and the point about equity, access, and inequities that are out there. One of the things that we know that there's definitely going to be a lot more remote learning taking place, both for students, for those training to be teachers, for those in preparation programs. And we want that remote learning to be effective remote learning, not just you're on Zoom and you're trying to carry this out like you did in a physical classroom. It does not work that way. We've already experienced some significant changes in how the field supports teachers and teacher preparation programs. One of the things that we did from the very beginning, which was pretty organic for us because it's a third part of our mission as far as using the expertise of board certified teachers. So over the last 3 months, one of the things that we've done for higher ed is to provide a subscription to what we call Atlas, Accomplished Teaching Learning in Schools. And it's a case library of accomplished teaching that is looked at through the lens of an accomplished teacher. It is their commentary, and it is tagged to what we call EdTPA. It is tagged to the NTAS standards, the 3 Cs, the National Board Standards, to the Next Generation Science Standards, to ELA, to mathematics, all of those things that pre-service teachers would need to know what it looks like in practice in a classroom. So it's no longer theory and this idea of saying, what does NTAS Standard 8 look like? I can see it. And I can see why it is tagged to the video and in the commentary of what a teacher thinks around preparation. The second thing we did was launch a series of webinars, and we called it Teachers Helping Teachers, the Core Connection. And this webinar series is led by teachers. It's built to share skills, to share best practices on a variety of topics related to distance learning. And a lot of those, we didn't just stop at how do you use technology? What does a good lesson look like when it's delivered virtually? But also to take care of the mental health of teachers out there. We have a webinar coming up this week with Mark Brackett, thinking about, how do we bring our best selves every day, and that includes the anxiety around delivering, quality instruction through a virtual platform that some teachers had no idea. And I think one of the worst things I have seen is that we had, and Michael, your district is very lucky to have someone like you, because there were districts who were saying, deliver this virtually, but never asked the teacher if they had even access to the internet. And some of them did not. So you have places where you can only deliver asynchronously, some places you can deliver synchronously, and some places are a combination. But that process has really helped. And then the last thing we did was to launch an online Canvas course that guided teachers through their board certification so that they could meet with support systems in place. So we gave them facilitators to work through their national board process. We gave them one-on-one mentors in order to do that as well. So another thing just to take the anxiety out of the work that they're doing, but give them real time, necessary and helpful, best practices, standards to go by for teaching virtually and online.
Excellent. And I think that's a good segue back to Dr. Martirano and a couple of questions that are coming from the question and answer. And certainly I think that do speak to education delivery as well as also teachers. And so I'm going to ask both of them simultaneously because I think they're related. And so one of the big concerns, of course, from a education and delivery deals with, again, this virtual, we've been in a virtual learning environment, but ultimately talk about kind of, I guess, when we go back to school and so forth, there's obviously a lot of concern for parents that have, with childcare and also just for the fact of the overall delivery of education. And so talk a little bit about maybe conversations that are being held with, outside of just Howard County, but even with your colleagues statewide as you try to determine if September is the date that students get back in the classroom. Also, with that being said as well, the other things that come along with, you touched on teachers and their even maybe emotional state and whether or not they feel comfortable coming back. So if you could touch on all of I know that's a big package, but certainly it's a lot that you're dealing with on a daily basis. So if you could just speak to, again, what's going into our students coming back in the fall, as well as how you're supporting our teachers as well, and making them comfortable to come back beyond what's also being done for our students to make them feel comfortable in this COVID-19 era.
Yeah, and how much time do I have? 2 hours? I will get to that. I'll try to be succinct. And building on my colleagues on the panel, early on, I recognized that we needed to provide an incredible amount of supports to our teachers. We were very intentional in Howard County about our rollout. I was using a quote early on that one of our teachers presented to me was, we need to Maslow first. We need to take care of our basic needs of food, clothing, and shelter while we're all getting used to this incredible, surreal moment in our history. As we're taking care of our families at home, we're tending to loved ones who are ill, individuals who are losing their jobs, and the strain which in our families are under, so that we Maslow first before we get to the Bloom's taxonomy. And that has kept me focused to support our teachers who, as you stated, are on that front line. I quickly realized the number of emails that I was receiving from our teachers and our union representatives that our teachers, and it's a no fault, our teachers have not been trained to fully teach in a synchronous, asynchronous, true distance learning model. We deliver, we stand and deliver in classrooms, we provide PD around traditional supports, and asking our teachers to pivot without supports is absolutely malpractice on our part as individuals who support them. So I've kept in the forefront of my mind how it feels to be a teacher in this time and what supports we have to provide them, both emotionally as well as then structurally and in the development, and not just a one and done, but an ongoing hand-holding process, because this is hard work for both students, for teachers who are delivering it, as well as family, and to understand that recognition. And that everybody's at different levels, particularly as we're leading with an agenda of equity. So know first and foremost that how we have led and how I hope others across the state and nation should be and are leading. But we have to put that in front. We just can't make assumptions. And those who have not been successful in the rollout are the ones who just threw the spaghetti against the wall and said, we hope that this sticks. We were very intentional and thoughtful about our rollout that caused a little consternation early on for our parent community that said we need to move faster. But I needed to make certain that we were providing that support for our teachers. Now, as we pivot to the fall, we think now, how do we do that long term? And opportunities within that, we need to make certain, as I've already said, have all the tools of support, that every child has access to the devices, that every teacher has access to the tools, and we continue to provide a wraparound scaffolding of support for our teachers to deliver in perpetuity. We don't know how long this is going to go. We don't know whether it's going to be a hybrid model of synchronous and asynchronous learning or what that's going to look like, but we have to prepare for the long term. The other issue within there is that this is something I believe Peggy or Kate mentioned, a wake-up call for all school systems in America to acknowledge the divide that exists, the digital divide, and to move things along in the 21st century. I will be using it as an opportunity to really move to an online platform of delivery. Every child gets a Chromebook. We load on open source information, and we stop thinking about instruction around a textbook. We spend millions of dollars a year on textbooks that are obsolete. Newsflash, teachers aren't presenting the curriculum by following the textbook as many of our parents and maybe us were as we were educated. Additionally, I'm looking to look at moving in that direction and providing additional enhancements of support, and then something commonsensically that we all as superintendents get ramped up on inclement weather days. We close for school and then we go through these gyrations of having to, and I just had to do it. I had to make a recommendation to the board where we added on days at the end of the year. I'd like to eliminate the makeup portion of that, have a snow day, cancel for snow, hit the online platform button, teachers engage, instruction continues, and at the end of the year, we don't have to worry about making up days. So look at those opportunities, but the crux of that comes from providing supports to our teachers and the infrastructure that our students and families and teachers need in order to do that. So as we're looking at the here and now, I'm looking at the forward thinking of how we can transform our district and delivery model, providing supports to our teachers to do that.
Leonardo, do you want to continue with that same question? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I was because I was going to actually ask you to do so on your end, as well as one of the things that you shared when you and I talked was how the college had already been doing some things virtual as well. And so if you could kind of just speak to, I guess, kind of what made the college, and maybe this again is just being in higher ed, but talk a little bit about the college's pathway during this, because it seems like it may have been, I guess, a little bit easier only because you've at least had some things in place, maybe from an infrastructure standpoint.
Yeah, well, one of the things is that all of our full-time faculty and most of our adjunct faculty communicated with students using the Canvas learning management system. So, they were used to communicating with students, with posting their syllabus, with, having chats, collecting information. So, that made that part of it easier, because for some places, they didn't have that as a basis. The other thing that I think we have is a very strong e-learning division of e-learning, that division does an outstanding job of professional development. And they went right into this to make sure that those faculty who weren't as comfortable with transitioning from face-to-face to the e-learning component through remote teaching were brought up to speed. And all during the summer, we will continue to do that. And why is that so important? Well, many schools now are going to online. They're going to have to be offering their courses remotely. We want to make sure that we continue to have the best product available for students, because if they don't have a good experience with us, they can go elsewhere very, very easily. They can take an online course at Anne Arundel, or the tuition's a little bit more expensive when you're out of county, but if you're not happy, you can go someplace else. So we want to make sure that we're offering the best possible product to our students. We did, I went back and looked to see how many students last fall were enrolled, of almost 9,400 credit students that were enrolled in online courses. And it was almost 2,500 students, so close to like 27% of our students were already taking an online class last fall. Now, what we find is many of those students take an online class and then they'll combine that with a face-to-face class. So for many students, it was an easy leap, but not all of them. So one of the things that we had to make sure is that the students felt comfortable with transitioning. And feedback that I report is, some students loved it. Some students, it wasn't their cup of tea. That's just the way it works. But we're trying to do everything possible to make sure that students have a very positive experience, that they meet the learning outcomes of the course, that they meet their degree requirements. The other thing that we do, I mentioned the credit courses, but we also have a number of what we call 9-credit offerings that are really addressing the workforce needs of our community. So for example, we just got a Google IT grant, which was offering and continues to offer free IT courses so that someone can start off as an entry-level IT support technician and have those skills that they can go right to work. And now we're trying to work with business partners for the hiring of these students. We have apprenticeships that we have available in construction management, biomedical engineering, HVAC/R, IT field. And these are shorter term programs. Some are in credit, but not all of them. And we're finding more and more that the landscape is changing as far as what people want to ready them for the workforce. So, you know, when we look ahead, we want to make sure that we're offering the best product available, that we're working with our business partners to see, when we look at the horizon, what are the new jobs going to be? You know, we went through something similar, not certainly the same, but when we had the Great Recession, we had people coming to the college in droves because they lost their jobs and they didn't know what was on the other end of that recession. What kind of work was going to be available? What opportunities would there be available? So not only our college, but community colleges throughout the state and the country are looking at working with the business community to say, what is it that you need? Community colleges are very agile. We can respond to the workforce needs. We can set up programs, whether they're short-term, long-term, credit, non-credit. And then we're also working with students that will be doing time as far as their first 2 years of education, then transferring. So we're working with our transfer partners. The main ones in this at this time are University of Maryland College Park, Towson University, UMBC, to make sure that we have seamless transfer for students. So, you know, it's all these factors that come into play, because at the end of the day, you go to college basically to make sure you have a job. It isn't like many, many years ago when I was there, yeah, let's go to college and, you know, study something that, you know, is going to be personally rewarding. Well, personally rewarding these days is having a job. And so that's one of the things that we're doing at our college to make sure that we have those connections. And again, here's the silver lining. There are probably jobs out there that are being thought of, developed right now that didn't even exist pre-COVID, didn't even exist. And so we will be ready to respond to those needs. And I have to give credit to our faculty who do, they're innovative, creative. They do an incredible job of making those community connections. So we're ready for the next phase.
And I think that really leads us up again to another question. And actually, Kate, we'll start with you. But all three of you have touched on this, and I want to make sure that we cover this before we run out of time. And that is, you each have talked about at various times digital divide, income inequality, and so forth. And I think that the COVID-19 virus has certainly further highlighted those issues. And so with that, let's talk about long-term impacts from a workforce development standpoint. I mean, ultimately, Kate, you touched on the fact that our students go to college with the ultimate goal being to become gainfully employed. Dr. Martirano and Peggy are working collectively to ensure that when students come through, that they can actually go to a Howard Community College or to a traditional four-year school later or what have you. And so let's talk a little bit about, again, the digital divide, income inequality, equity, et cetera, and how has COVID-19, I guess, further brought that to the forefront, but more importantly, how do we somehow start trying to address these concerns, thinking about what the impact will be on the future workforce? And so maybe, Kate, we'll start with you, and then I'll go to Peggy, and then wrap it up with Dr. Martirano.
One of the things that we did right at the beginning of all this is survey our students. We sent this brief survey out to them saying, what is it that you need? How can we help? And that would be anything related to computer, to hotspot, to knowing where to get food, anything related to staying in school, because we wanted to make sure that we retain students during this spring semester. And we received well over 1,000 responses, maybe even more than that. I don't have the exact number handy, but anyway, what we did with that information is we looked at every single response. And some students said, I'm okay, thanks for asking, I'm good. But other students had truly dire needs. again, going back to these inequities we see in Howard County, one of the wealthiest counties in the United States, even here in Howard County. So we triage with the responses for these students and did outreach to them to make sure that they knew how to get a computer, how to get a hotspot, how to get the service that they needed. We worked with Verizon on that to get the service for students. So I think of anything, the computers were key, but also just basic, I need food. How am I going to feed myself? It goes back to what Mike was saying about those, the Maslow's hierarchy theory. And so, going forward, I just see that as a continuation already we told students, if you're enrolled for spring and you're going to register for summer or fall, keep the computer for now. You don't have to schlep it back to the college and then bring it back again. Hold on to it. You can hold on to that computer. Just, as long as you're registered for fall, we're fine. You can hold on to it. We're trying to make things easy for people because they're living with things like, how am I going to feed my children today? How am I going to make sure that employment opportunities are ready for me tomorrow when things get brighter on the employment job front? So this is truly basics that we're dealing with people, and it's hard to believe because it's Howard County, but it's very, very real. And for those students who don't have a home, it's even more real. And I'll tell you, some of those stories are absolutely heart-wrenching when you hear them.
Kate, I'll have to agree with everything that you've said. And the one thing that this has allowed is to have us as educational leaders to take a step back and to consider this big picture about how we better approach schooling in terms of particularly social emotional learning, character education. I have seen online, as I've jumped into webinars and Zoom classrooms, where parents are learning at the same time as students are learning, particularly our ELL students in the Southwest, where parents are on with, preschool, first grade, second grade, and learning English along with their children. That has been phenomenal. I think one of the things that, being in Maryland, you have learned through the Curran Commission and now are a national leader for other states to look at to see, what are some of the most successful school systems in the world are doing in order to change learning and to make sure that we are really focused on these inequities, because this has brought out the light to shine on those. And I think about it in ways where we're thinking about this student who was in class who may not have been responsive, and now it has put a spotlight because they're not there at all online. And how were we not reaching them, and how did we not see that? So it is going to require a whole new sense of how we go about learning and how we go about teaching, and how those two things cannot be separated. And the focus on the needs of children and how we deliver those needs both in school now, if that happens in the next few years in the way that we could return to normal, which I don't think will ever happen again in that way, but how we support, equip teachers in order to be ready to deliver to this new commitment of what is for a lot of students and a lot of parents were inequities for them that will now, come to light in a sense that we have seen them and now we can't avoid them anymore. I think parents would appreciate that. And in so many ways, it's making hard decisions at the same time, but our focus is on these students.
Can't hear
Sorry,
you.
I ran into some technical difficulty here, but I was just going to say the same question for you in terms of this equity issue and ultimately what it means for workforce development.
Thank you. And again, building on my colleagues' comments, at the initial phases of the pandemic, we made a commitment to lead during this time the same way that we lead before the pandemic, with love, care, and compassion for all members of our community, and keeping that at the forefront of all we do. And building upon what Kate had said, we have to remind ourselves, we're Howard County. We are one of the most wealthy counties in America. Out of 3,000 counties, I think we rank in the top 5 in terms of income. But amongst us are individuals who are greatly struggling, who aren't benefiting from that affluence. And to remind myself constantly, I have to remind our community that our free and reduced meals rate for our student body in Howard County Public Schools is 23%. 23% of our young people qualify for free and reduced meals. During this pandemic, we have led with, again, taking care of our community first and foremost before we bloom in terms of the instruction. We have 14 sites that we're providing meals for our students. And up to this point, we have served over 800,000 meals in Howard County. If you go to any one of the 14 sites of which we have, there is a line between 11:30 and 1:30 every day for individuals waiting. We provided additional support over this holiday. We just can't take it for granted that everybody was going to have a barbecue over the holiday. There are food deserts and food insecurity right here in Howard County, and we need to lift that up. If students were homeless before the pandemic, they're homeless now too. If students were abused before the pandemic, they are abused now. And in many ways, that has blossomed even more so. We're seeing higher levels of incidence of child abuse. As we're doing our check-ins with our students during this time, I'm very pleased that we're seeing online check-ins, but I also don't want to make certain that we lose any of our students during this time. We have a high percentage of online check-in, but the attendance is starting to wane off. If our students are vulnerable during these, before the pandemic, they're more vulnerable now. So to keep that there, keep that in the forefront for our families who have lost jobs, for our own staff members. I employ around 12,000 full and part-time employees. 21,000 of our employees, we provide benefits for 21,000 of our employees. So keep in mind, these data points are real, and people making decisions now not to retire, to delay decisions to retire because they want the benefits. There's a great level of concern in the future. So we want to provide that level of calm and provide a strong supportive infrastructure. And again, I know I'm being redundant, but it's so important to me that as we move forward, that those basic supports are there of leading with love, care, and compassion, but the infrastructure is there to provide the devices necessary so our students can thrive and our teachers can provide that support as we move to a technological driven platform of instruction for the future that we all need to get behind.
Thank you. And so with that, I think we're starting to get near the end of our time. And so I'm just going to maybe ask one final question for this, maybe a brief response. And it's really simple, and that is, as we come to, end of today and so forth, if there was one takeaway that you would want our audience to leave with, just what would it be as it relates to education and COVID-19 and so forth? In terms of things that perhaps you just really want them to maybe understand or perhaps even appreciate as we continue to move forward. And so with that, we'll start with you, Peggy, and work our way back through Dr. Martirano and end with Kate.
I think for me, it would be thinking about education not as an expense, but an investment. And more importantly, that investment has to be also focused on those who have the highest impact and those who have the closest relationship with students, and that would be teachers. And how we support them through, how we listen to their voices, how we incorporate what they've said to us about their needs and how they impact students. But I think we have to look at this as an investment.
Dr. Martirano?
I think for me, the takeaway is continue right now as we understand why are we all social distancing. There is a pandemic that we're fighting, and we need to remember that. We're trying to prevent the spread, and we're trying to keep people safe and prevent individuals from getting ill. To keep that in the forefront. Second is that we need to be patient with ourselves. We need to be kind to ourselves. We need to be kind to our community and to each other as we're leading this. Everyone, all of our educators are working extremely hard to do this. This is a whole new frontier. Kate has talked about silver lining. I'm looking at this as an opportunity to be extremely innovative in this time of crisis, to provide better supports for our students and teachers and using these opportunities, but remembering first and foremost that we need to take care of ourselves and to be kind to ourselves and to be gentle with each other as we're moving through this, because I've seen some of the best of our community right now, but I've surely seen some of the greater challenges come out. And we need to all join hands to say, how can we make this the best for all of our citizens in Howard County as we pivot to a new frontier of educational delivery? And we're primed to do that.
The one thing I would add to what the other Peggy and Mike have said is that when we look ahead, one question we ask ourselves is, well, what will the future look like? And nobody has that answer. Nobody has that answer. And so you can surmise about what the possibilities are. And at times when you think about it, it can be overwhelming and frightening. And if we're feeling that as adults, you can imagine what young people are feeling right now. Seniors who just graduated from high school, middle school children. They're watching their parents, they're observing their behavior, and because we're with each other so much, they're picking up on it. So I think, if anything, as hard as it is, being mindful of, being your best self at a really tough time is so critical, because those impressions you leave on children can remain for a long time. And so it's sort of echoing what Mike has talked about too, about being patient and being kind, but just being very mindful of how you're reacting and the impact that has on others is very important. And as far as the college is concerned, I'm hopeful that we will do everything that we can to continue to meet our mission, providing pathways to success. And all that is based on basically doing the right thing for everybody.
Excellent. And with that will conclude our discussion for today. But first, I want to thank again all of our panelists, and Peggy Brookins, Dr. Michael Martirano, and Dr. Kate Hetherington for sharing their insights with us. I think we've had a great conversation this morning, and certainly I think will be one of many that we'll have to continue to have as we move forward. Certainly, I want to remind those of you that are still on, as well as those that will watch a recording of this, two things. First is tomorrow on the 27th, we will be having a question and answer on opening Howard County for business with our county executive, Dr. Calvin Ball. And so that will be 12:30. And then also on Thursday, we will have our final Preparing to Open series, as we will talk about childcare, because certainly childcare and education are linked. But for sure, many parents will be leaning on childcare. They lean on summer camps and as well as daycares for their children during the course of the day. And that's whether you are deemed essential or not. But certainly we know that our camps are not occurring in the way that we might have thought. And that's going to have added pressures to employees, and employers have to be mindful of that as we continue to move forward. And so again, I thank you all for your continued support of the Howard County Chamber. Stay safe and have a great rest of your day.